Welcome to The Green Rush, a podcast about the business of cannabis. On a weekly basis, hosts Ann Donahoe and Louis Goldberg talk with the CEOs, politicians, and cultural icons driving the cannabis industry forward. This week is part one of our special broadcast from the floor of the Marijuana Business Daily Conference in Las Vegas. At the mid-November conference, Louis and Ann took to Podcasters Row to chat with a number of guests to discuss the growth of the conference, the excitement of the industry as a whole, and to get the lowdown on what's coming next for the burgeoning business of cannabis. For part one, we have Louis and Ann's conversation with Troy Dayton, founder and CEO of the ArcView Group, an industry investment and research company that provides financing for cannabis-related businesses and projects through its network of investor members. In addition to leading ArcView, Troy is also an elected board member of the Marijuana Policy Project, a founding board member of the National Cannabis Industry Association, and a co-founder of Students for Sensible Drug Policy. In the second half of the show, Ann and Louis sit down with Kris Krane, president of Forefront. After initially founding Forefront as a consulting firm back in 2011, Kris has transformed it into a leading retail and brand development company with a multi-state operational footprint, including its mission-branded retail stores. In addition to running Forefront, Kris also serves on the National Cannabis Industry Association's board of directors and pens a column about the cannabis industry for Forbes. The conversations with Troy and Kris are each slightly shorter than our average episode, but are jam-packed with information and observations from two of the brightest minds driving the future of the cannabis space. We hope you enjoy. Don't sit back, lean forward. And now on to our interview with Troy Dayton and Kris Krane.
So we are here now with Troy Dayton, co-founder and CEO of the ArcView Group. Troy, tell us a little bit about what is ArcView. I'm sure everybody knows what it is, but in your own words, as you know, who are you?
Well,
who are you and what do you do?
We're a lot of things. Most people probably know us from our market research. So we put out a lot of the market research and data, and we've been doing that since 2011. And we've partnered with BDS Analytics, which has the deepest sort of network of POS data. And we put out reports about the market and really understanding. So people who are making expensive decisions in the space, market research that we put out is a really good place to start. We also have an investor network of about 600 high net worth investors that have placed over $200 million into about 190 companies in this space. Many of the big names that you know about came through ArcView. We also recently launched a venture fund. So more
how big is the fund?
It will be over $100 million.
Fabulous! Congratulations.
And, thank you. And then we also have we're also partners with Canopy Boulder, which is a seed stage mentor-driven accelerator a la Techstars in the tech industry. So we've been doing that for about 3-4 years. We're a partner in Canisure Insurance Services. A lot of things.
So tell us about the most recent research that came out yesterday, because I was not aware of it, but we've been a little busy trying to get this show already.
We just released a report on flower, which really looks at the sort of the central piece of the cannabis sector, which is the sale of flower, which is very changing, right? Because concentrates and edibles and other things are grabbing more and more market share, and the market share of going to flower is shrinking. But you've got what we discovered though is that even though it's shrinking as a percentage of market share, it's still growing, and it's changing. It's shifting from non-branded flower to branded flower, and that's starting to become a big trend.
So when you say branded, do you mean like Willie's Reserve,
Sure.
or is it more like what Candescent is doing? I mean, can you
branded means when you buy it, it's not. It's like it's the difference between going to the produce aisle and getting a Chiquita banana and a banana that doesn't have the name, like that kind of thing, right? So does it have a brand name on it or not, or does it just come from the dispensary?
And it's not a strain name; it's a brand name. Right? You're not talking
Correct,
about like Gorilla
I'm not
Glue.
talking about strains, right? I'm talking about brands. A company.
Okay.
that wraps its name around something.
So are you seeing consumers, are they reporting back that they are becoming acculturated to brands, that
Yes.
they get the idea like, okay, there's a fundamental difference between brand A and like between Coke and Pepsi?
Correct. Oh, well, no. I think that they are getting interested in the brand, but I don't think they're at that differentiation phase yet, at least not with flower. in part because part of the problem with branding flower is consistency. It's a whole lot easier to get a consistent edible or and to some degree a consistent concentrate than it is to get a consistent flower. So I think there's a lot of work to be done on developing that kind of brand connection with the product. So I think, that's one of the challenges in the, branding flower thing. And then the other thing is that so far in our sector, brands have really been the dispensaries are the brands.
Yeah,
right?
You've got MedMen or Curaleaf
Yeah.
or God, there's so many others. But
yeah. So you've got dispensaries that in Harborside, et cetera, that have a brand name. And so when you go in to buy flower, you're essentially buying, Harborside flower or whatever.
Right.
So there's some branding happening, at point of sale branding, right? The actual dispensary branding as well. And so there's it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
Well, it's funny because Adam Bierman, the CEO of MedMen, argues that it's the channel that matters. And then you have guys who are like Dixie or Lowell Farms or Candescent, who I'm a huge fan of, argue that it doesn't matter what the channel is, it's the product and treating cannabis like a consumer packaged good. What do you think is the right strategy?
As long as there are hyper limited licenses in states and super protected markets, he's right.
Who's he?
Adam Bierman.
Okay.
He's right that it's about the retailer. A retailer's king. If there's only 7 places in a state that you can sell product, and there's only 7 places you can go buy it, well, guess what? That's who controls the market.
But doesn't that all change then once deregulation happens or rescheduling happens?
If that's a great question. We can talk a little bit about that's a whole nother ball. Okay, all right. Do we want to go there?
Do
Why
we
not?
wanna go
Yeah.
there?
Okay, you know what?
Yeah. That was
Why
going to
don't
be
you
my
go
next
there?
question.
All
anyway.
right. I'll go there. So, the big question of the day is when does federal prohibition end? How does federal prohibition end? And how does that impact interstate commerce or not? And how does that intersect? How does that impact the regulatory situation in each of the states? So let's start with the first question, right? I believe not 100%, but a very good likelihood that federal prohibition ends in 2020 or 2021. And I don't mean that it's legal everywhere. I mean that the federal government has officially said the states are not violating any federal laws by
through States Act, or
through
you
a
think
state,
through
something
a
similar to a States
Okay.
Act. Yes.
So you think the States Act does not get done in 19? You think it gets pushed out at least to 2020?
There's an outside chance it gets done in 19, but I think that's a little probably a little ambitious.
Okay.
And I think that the Trump administration is going to want to make cannabis legalization theirs. And as a result, there's actually going to be a tug of war over who gets credit and what the bill ultimately looks like and who it favors.
we talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
That seems to be the Republicans are going to snatch this issue from the Democrats.
It's so ripe, and
it's so bipartisan.
So
it's
bipartisan.
Universally accepted, universally supported.
Yeah,
so
the Democrats can't get away with not supporting it,
Right.
And they're about to lose the moral high ground for being the ones that carry the torch. Well, partly because they don't have the House, they don't have the Senate and the presidency.
So who do you think? If you think about what the new Congress is going to look like, who are some of the rising stars or the people that you're looking to follow or pay attention to, or who should our listeners be paying attention to in the new Congress?
Oh, in terms of actual people?
Yeah.
Do you have any
not,
faves?
I'm not that.
Okay.
You mean like in Congress to like push the issue?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Who's good on the
Like
issue?
a Tulsi Gabbard or
Yeah,
a Ro
I'm not.
Khanna.
I'm not at that level of.
Okay.
I mean, I could spitball on it, but I don't want to. It's not. I haven't really looked at that closely. But I do think we have the votes for things in Congress, and now that Pete Sessions is gone, that's really gives us a whole.
All the sessions are
all
gone.
the sessions.
The sessions
Let's have a
are
session
gone.
to celebrate the sessions
sessions.
gone. But so there was a couple questions in that, right? So the first one was, when does federal law change? How does it change? And then the next one is about how we handle interstate commerce or not interstate commerce. So there's a belief out there, and I tend to subscribe to it, which is that the states with limited licensing they are so committed to holding on to that regime, and they will do whatever is in their power, particularly the people that get that disproportionate benefit, to hold on to that regime even after federal law changes and stop interstate commerce. They're going to want to keep their thing. And everyone's aligned on it, right? The state's aligned on it because they want the tax dollars.
And the jobs.
Tax dollars and jobs. And so it becomes this very protectionist instinct. In the western states, I think you'll probably see something different. I think you may see, because they have looser regimes, you may see those states, particularly on the West, kind of all come to an agreement on it, because I think the powers that be, it'll make sense to do that. But there's one thing that could change all of that, and that is the courts, because there is a scenario whereby the courts actually force interstate commerce, because there's a clause, and off the top of my head, I don't know which. It might be actually
the interstate commerce clause in the Constitution.
No, there's something about that, essentially, that protects against states keeping things from going interstate. Right?
Yeah, the interstate commerce clause. It's actually it's in the Constitution that if it's federally legal, no state can bar another state from doing business with them.
Totally.
So they can't.
Yeah, and so what we may see though is that they craft whatever law passes in a way that still makes it possible to avoid the interstate commerce clause, right? So there could be some really interesting ways that people navigate around this, but there's also an interesting thing developing around who benefits from these different laws, right? So, your multi-state operators right now, they all have a very big vested interest in keeping this really narrow, very small, limited licensing, right? But the new players that are coming in, and this gets to your question about the brands and what they want versus the power of the dispensaries and the cultivators. Brands and any company with a few $1 billion coming into this space, any of the big players.
Just a few $1 billion.
Right, just a few $1 billion. They don't want limited licensing. They want as much access as possible. They know that they're going to perform best when there's mass interstate commerce and when consumers have the most access to this product as possible, right? And that's the real money showing up. And
that's
so
the Constellation money
the
going
game.
into Canopy, right? I mean,
right. There's that, but there's that. That's the tip of the iceberg. I mean, everybody's looking at this.
So
yeah.
So you've got a venture fund, right?
Yes.
And $100 million for a venture fund is not chump change.
No.
A lot of people would argue that we're only in the second inning of the industry, but is there still space for new companies to enter, or?
Absolutely. There's, we had a panel at one of our events with with the heads of some of the biggest multi-state operators, and a question was asked: What's the biggest problem you face that needs solving? What's the best opportunity out there? Like, what problems do you need to be solved? And every single one of them said software. Every single one of them that said, look, everything from business software to cultivation software to point of sale software to marketing software, none of it works right. And there's so much opportunity for a better mousetrap. And that, I think, is a big opportunity. There's also a huge boom happening right now in the ag tech space, outside of cannabis. Well, now that cannabis is here, it's like a boom to a boom that was already a boom. Right? And so the combination of the cannabis boom and the ag tech boom is a match made in heaven. And that bodes really well for consolidation and for other things, because the price of flower and the price of just cultivation cannabis, wholesale cannabis, is really tanking. And so everyone's looking to get better yield. Everybody's looking to do all of these things. And the new technology coming out that's going to help with that agricultural aims is huge. And the biotech involved in that and everything else, the IP around that, we have barely scratched the surface. But you often think about venture and you think about like seed stage venture. Well, I'm not talking about seed stage venture here. I mean, we'll be opportunistic at the seed stage, but we're really looking more at that A and that B stage, people who've already got traction in the marketplace. Yeah.
So you're looking to be the Kleiner Perkins of the industry. You're not an angel fund. You're a venture fund, a traditional venture fund.
And we, of course, through our other projects, play a big role in that angel financing piece, but not through a fund.
No,
model.
but that's the history of ArcView, is facilitating a lot of that.
Yeah, and now a lot of those companies have grown up, and we know which ones only look good on paper, right?
Yeah.
And which ones really are good, and but might not have the best pitcher or whatever, So when you're really in that space, we feel like we've got a really good ability to evaluate where we're headed, and we've got a pretty diverse team as well.
So we're sitting at the MJ BizCon show, and this is it's the biggest trade show in the space. But ArcView historically has done its own shows. Can you talk about? You just finished the ArcView conference, and how was that, and what did you learn that surprised you?
Yeah, so what we do is very different than what MJ Biz does. So we focus a very curated group of people, high net worth investors, institutions, family offices, that are looking to place at least $250,000 into the cannabis sector, up to people who are placing, $50 million into the space, right? It's them as well as curated companies that have been selected to be there, or big public companies that are looking to reach audiences, or companies that are about to go public, or service providers that are looking to reach that as well. But they've got to be sponsors and things like that. So it's a very curated group. At least 60 to 70% of the people that are at our events are major high net worth investors looking to place capital. And that's what makes it totally different than anything else that happens in this space. And it's also a community. So it's not about just showing up at an event and exchanging business cards. People come there not just to take, but to give. And it's an ongoing community of people that are making a difference in building this industry in a really powerful way. And so people feel a real sense of belonging, and they really work with each other and collaborate on deals in a really powerful way. And this last event was a real phase change, a real game changer. We had over 500 people there. We had a lot of the big public companies in Canada that came down. We had a lot of companies that are about to go public, many of the people you've heard about. And then we also had our traditional batch of early stage startups that are looking to raise $500,000 to $1 million to $2 million, right? For the people that like to get in on that early phase. And we also had some really great conversations. We had the Richard Carlton, the CEO of the...
We just
talked with him. What a great guy.
He is sharp.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with him. And his understanding of this sector and his vision, really, I did not expect that. Honestly, I did not. I thought that we were going to get somebody who was just pitching companies on why they should go list on his exchange, right?
Oh yeah, that was
but
not at
didn't
all
know
our
what,
and
instead this guy shows up, and he's a great presenter, and he gets it. Like he feels like one of us. He gets it.
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that we're one of you.
Yeah. I was super impressed, and it makes sense. I mean, look. He had better be an expert on cannabis business now, because it's like half of his
the cannabis exchange, right?
He's been doing, they think they started in 13 or 14. One of the first companies that they listed was a cannabis company. I mean, he's been listing cannabis companies almost from the founding of the time of the exchange. So he is really, I mean, when you say one of us, no, we're one of him.
Right.
Like he's way ahead of everybody else.
Yeah. So that was a cool thing. The other, really, it was about the people assembled, and in the past, I think there's been a lot of people with capital that are talking, and what I noticed at this event was a lot of those people are ready to deploy. They want to move, right? They are ready to place now, and I think the possibility that federal law changes in the next 2 years has got the capital kind of trigger happy all of a sudden. And I think there's some good things about that, and there's some bad things about that. Anytime capital gets really trigger happy, it's there's going to be a lot of money made and a lot of money lost, right? Because you start pulling the trigger on stuff you shouldn't. But
so what
yeah.
like, everybody wants to know like what the winners are, but how do you help people identify where the risks are? Like, how do you say, like, yeah, that's a bad idea, don't put your money there? Like, I can help you think otherwise. Like, what are the triggers that you're looking for?
Well, when unless they're putting money with our fund, I mean, we're not the fiduciary, right? So we don't tell people what's a good investment and what's not a good investment. What we do is utilize our good judgment and also our membership. We have a member-driven process for selecting companies that weeds out a lot of the BS. And we have a lot of different ways, like, we have sharks, we have this whole shark program.
Yep.
And part of what the shark's job is ahead of the event to really look under the hood of these companies and pull out the things that investors should want to know and ask the tough questions, which I think is really important. And when you get the smartest people in the room in a curated environment, once they start asking questions and you start talking with them, like, that's how people really get to know these companies. At a big conference like this, very hard, right? Because it's kind of anonymous, right? And so we have a whole, process where it's ongoing all the time, where we're evaluating companies, we're doing webinars, we have a whole deal platform. So at any given time, our investor members are able to access, 100 or so live deals that are getting updated on a regular basis, and people can express their interest, and you can collaborate then as a member with other investors in negotiating or evaluating those deals, which is one of the really powerful things. We don't take a fee on that, right? I mean, that's just people pay a membership fee to be part of the group, and then it's our job to help people get connected to the things that they want to get connected to, and it's their business.
Can we talk a little bit about Kris Krane was just in here, and you've known him for 20 years. I mean, there's a few people in the industry who have really, made the shift from the advocacy side to the entrepreneurial side. So, and you've been, flagged by Fortune magazine as one of the most important people in cannabis. So can you talk a little bit about what brought you to the industry 20 years ago or 25 years ago?
Yeah. When I was in high school, I tried pot for the first time, and in the middle of smoking it, a security guard pulls up with a light on, gets out, puts me in. We were outside at this thing, and he puts me in handcuffs, puts me into the car, takes me down to the station, and he says, "You can either call the cops or you can call your parents." I was like, "All right, well, I guess I'm calling my mom." So I started calling my mom, and midway through the dialing, it was one of these rotary phones, so that's how long ago it was. And my friends come barreling into the room, laughing and cracking up because they were they had played a joke on me.
They were screwing with you?
They set the security guard
awesome.
up to arrest me.
By the way, that's the fundamental difference between the two of us.
I was like, bunch of jerks, and he's like, that's amazing.
Right, totally. I'm with you.
I think it's funny as hell.
I was really upset.
Well, that's like swatting, which is not funny. So,
right. So it was like, I kind of had this moment where I was like, oh my God, thank God it was a joke for me. But for millions and millions of people, it's not a joke.
Right.
They get really arrested. They lose. And I thought to myself, this is an injustice and I need to stop it. And so I got to college, and I happened to go to college at a place where the Arnold Trebach, who co-founded the Drug Policy Foundation, which is now the Drug Policy Alliance, was a professor. And it was also the year that the Marijuana Policy Project was being founded, and I wound up being their very first volunteer. I licked the envelopes on the very first mailing that MPP ever sent out in '95, and I just got hooked. It was the first thing, they say that, cannabis is addictive, but I don't think cannabis is addictive, but I do think cannabis legalization is. I was hooked. I was like, this is misunderstood.
Yeah.
It's 1995.
Wow.
No laws had changed. It was 30% public support, and I just felt like I could make a difference. And so I got really involved from there. But along the way, and I co-founded Students for Sensible Drug Policy, and actually Kris Krane. So Kris Krane, the very first event that Kris Krane ever went to for cannabis policy was an event that I put on at American University because him and I went to the same college.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Small world.
Yes. And so yeah, we've been involved for a long time, and then I co-founded SSDP, and then Kris later became the executive director of SSDP, and so what made me move into the business side was I was MPP's lead fundraiser in California, and I saw all these wealthy people that I was raising money with for the cause who were just doing it out of the kindness of their heart. They just wanted to see justice. They didn't have any profit interest. And I was also raising money from people that were running dispensaries and different things that are kind of related to the cannabis sector. And they were donating because, they were committing civil disobedience and they wanted to change that. And I started to notice that, oh my God, here we go. We're starting a new industry. I never even crossed my mind all these years that doing this would lead to the next big business boom. It never crossed my mind until 2009. I'd been at this for 14 years out of the kindness of my heart before I realized, oh my God, there's going to be a big industry out of this. A
revolution.
And I had done some work in the renewable energy space, and I knew that
Adam Oren's actually, right? From Marijuana Policy Group.
Mm-hmm. And I had done some of that and realized that in the renewable energy industry, look, there was only so much you could do by sending letters to Congress. Ultimately, you have to create profitable business models if you want something done in the world. And so all of a sudden, it hit me. It was like, oh, I know how we're going to legalize cannabis. We're going to build a profitable, responsible, and politically engaged industry. That's how we're going to do it. And so it hit me that it'd be a lot easier to raise money for the cause from folks if they had a vested interest in the outcome. And if I could, reach them. And the only way to reach them is to dangle something they want, right? Yep. And for a lot of people, they don't really care about legalization. But I'm going to help them, show them that legalization's in their best interest. And so we started bringing people together in 2010. I paired up with Steve D'Angelo, became our first investor and my co-founder. And we've been helping people get connected in this space ever since.
All right, so we're going to be respectful of your time. You've been really generous. Thank you so much. We definitely want to have you back for a full hour conversation. Sure. So
and plug anything you want. Where can people find you? Give us your Twitter handle.
ArcViewGroup.com.
What's your sign?
I'm T-Dazzle on with no E. On Twitter,
and he's completely bedazzled now.
Totally done. Yep. And next big thing we're working on is actually not a big thing at all. It's a small thing. It's Aspen High, December 3rd through 5th. We bring a small group of a really curated audience, 150 people to Aspen. It's our unconference. So it's only a few hours of programming in the afternoon. Otherwise, we're chilling. We're sitting around the fire, skiing, playing songs, really dropping in with each other. It's really fun. Highly recommend people participate.
Cool. We'll have a link.
Yeah,
perfect.
We'll stick a
and
link
then
in
otherwise, this flower report and the concentrates report.
We'll make sure we have links to that
stuff
in our show notes too.
Thank you, guys.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, so we have another guest today. We are here with another repeat champion, Kris Krane, co-founder of Forefront and longtime friend of ours and of the podcast, and more importantly, at KCSA. Kris, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So you are probably the smartest guy when it comes to the intersection of policy and politics and cannabis. What's your reaction to the elections that just took place?
Yeah, no, overall very positive. I think the Democrats taking the House of Representatives is probably the single biggest development as far as the industry goes. I think this means that we're going to see movement on some sort of federal legislation, whether it's standalone legislation or more likely amendments to larger appropriations or authorization bills. It means that the Rules Committee will allow votes on these amendments.
Yeah, Jim McGovern has said he specifically will allow, and he's going to be.
That's correct.
He's the new, will be
he's
the new
chair of the Rules Committee.
Yeah.
Well, but even more importantly, the Democrats get to write the initial legislation, so we have an opportunity to get a lot of these provisions written into the original bills. We don't even have to vote on the amendments to get them in. So we could potentially see something like 280E reform, banking reform, introduced as part of these original spending bills or authorization bills. Now, we almost certainly won't get those in the Senate, but if it gets passed through the House, then there's a realistic chance that we get this done through conference committee. So we have a real chance of getting meaningful reform this year that we just did not have for the past few years, particularly with now ousted Pete Sessions ruling over the Rules
We've
Committee.
now trampled on poor Pete Sessions 3 times this morning.
He's very trampleable.
And by the way,
He is very
no
trampleable.
poor Pete Sessions. First of all, I have no idea how much money he's worth, but I guarantee you
He's
he has a job
probably
on K
not
Street
poor.
already.
I'm sure he's going to be just
Yeah.
fine. Yeah, I would say like don't kick someone when they're down, but it feels pretty good.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I
Him
don't
and-
mind kicking him while he's down.
If we
That's
had both
perfectly fine.
Pete Sessions and Jeff Sessions and
Yeah,
could
kick 'em
use them
both.
as
Yeah.
a carpet, we could walk across them. I'd put on high heels for the first time just to do that.
yeah,
For
a bunch
the
of
first
some, Yeah,
time.
some cleats or something be great. Yeah.
So,
Actually, and before we move on, Kris has a column on Forbes, and he's been very prescient about the politics leading up to the midterms, and there's some really great insight in there. So we'll make sure that we put a link into our show notes. 'Cause
Actually,
they're
you-
awesome columns.
well, you
Thank
did
you.
4,
Thank you.
right? You did the 4 best congressmen, the 4 worst congressmen, the 4 best...
Five, yeah,
five, sorry.
4 columns each. The five best and worst members of Congress and Senate.
So of those 20 that you identified, right? 4 times 5 is 20. I was
yep,
told there
20
would be no
total, yep.
math. How many lost and how many won?
Oh, I'd have to go back and look. The
Rohrabacher's
notable,
out.
Yeah, I was going to say the notable
Yeah.
losses were Rohrabacher, which was from the best column. Rohrabacher and I believe Corbello was also on that column.
Yep.
So we lost 2 of our best Republicans.
Best Republicans in terms
In
of
cannabis, right?
Cannabis.
Right.
Yes, cannabis
Let's be
only.
clear.
Yes, let's be clear. Cannabis only. Losing Rohrabacher is probably a win for America,
Yes.
and if it's a loss for cannabis. So we'll take it, especially with the Democrats taking the House. His influence is less important now.
And Harley Root is not bad on cannabis. He's just a Democrat on cannabis, right?
Well, we have no idea where he is on cannabis.
Oh, we
He said
don't?
some-
Okay.
He said some decent things. I mean, it would be hard for him to be as good as Rohrabacher. Rohrabacher's been, he's been a champion since way before it was popular, even amongst the Democrats. He was there. I remember Rohrabacher coming into my office and when I was working for Normal back in 2003 or so. When he first came out publicly on this issue. So, I mean, Rohrabacher was a genuine champion, and that'll be a real loss for us, regardless. But, like I said, the trade-off of the Democrats taking the House and having leadership that's going to allow for votes to be called as well, worth losing Rohrabacher, worth losing Corbello. We lost Jared Polis, who was on our best list in the House as well, but he's become the governor of Colorado, so that's an okay loss.
And
we'll
he
take
probably will even be better than Hickenlooper was, right? Because
that. Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Hickenlooper was always wishy-washy on this, right? He was he came around with support over the years, but it was always tepid. And they always couched it with well, we got to look at this, and we got. I mean, you don't get a better supporter than Jared Polis. I mean,
Right.
He is he is a true friend of the issue. He's a friend of the industry. I mean, he's literally close personal friends with people like Ian Sieb and Kayvon Kalatbari and some of the pioneers of the Colorado industry. Like, they're all friendly. They've all known each other from their pre-politics
Right.
days. So Polis as governor of Colorado, he's going to be the most pro-marijuana governor in the country in the state that's most associated with the marijuana industry. That's a big boon for the industry. So another one that I was okay with him. Well, he didn't lose his seat. He stepped down to become governor. I'm okay.
Yes.
I'm okay losing.
He
him
moved
in
up.
Congress. That's right.
He ascended.
Yes, but seeing Pete Sessions get voted out, that was fantastic. On the Senate side, there wasn't really much movement. I think everybody's still there on the Senate side.
McCaskill lost, but
She wasn't on the list.
Yeah,
No, I'm trying to think of the Democrats that lost. I don't think any of them were on the list. And only 2 Republicans lost, and neither of them were on the list. Right? Dean Heller and Jeff Flake weren't there. So, Dianne Feinstein's still kicking around in the Senate, unfortunately for us. Although she's come around a little bit, but I don't trust that for a second. I didn't get her core is still very much a prohibitionist. She just realized that she couldn't win a race in California with that position. So thankfully, the politics of it got her to come around. But I think we're still solid on both sides on the Senate side of things.
So let's pivot to the AG, right? Luckily Jeff Sessions, is
Yes.
gone. Elmer Fudd.
Also a good for marijuana, maybe not good for America, which is really weird to say about Jeff Sessions.
Yes.
It's this whole climate is just weird.
But
who would have thought
very
you would
weird to
ever
say
say
that about
those
Jeff
words?
Sessions, that's right.
But there's 2 people who are being looked at potentially as the new Attorney General, Chris Christie and Rudy Giuliani. neither of which are friends of the
I don't
industry.
think Rudy
I don't
Giuliani's
think
being
he can-
seriously looked
yeah,
at
I don't-
those. Kris Christie
yeah.
is for sure, but I don't think they could do Giuliani because he's Trump's personal lawyer now, and so he would have to recuse himself from the Russia investigation.
Why?
Immediately? Because he's been a lawyer
an
in that
insider.
investigation.
Yeah.
He's legally conflicted.
No, I understand. I understand the legal side of it, but you think that putting
well,
that
I think
aside.
he would have to.
All right, so let's put that
I think
aside.
the courts would force him to.
So let's assume, for argument's sake, that our good friend, the fat fuck from New Jersey, Kris Krane, is appointed AG.
That would suck. Yeah.
Yeah. What would happen? Like, what do you think his role? Is he going to be even more aggressive of a prohibitionist, or
He
what would
might
happen?
be. I mean, you can't be more of a prohibitionist than Jeff Sessions. I mean, for somebody who says that they were okay with the Ku Klux Klan until they found out they smoked weed, right? Like you don't get worse than that. But Christie is also a true believer on this. He sucks. He would like to crack down if he could. He sort of famously said when he was running, if you live in Colorado and you're enjoying your legal weed, enjoy it now because it's all going to end when I'm president. Thankfully that didn't happen. I do think, though, even with somebody as bad as Christie, it would be very hard for him to do a serious crackdown. And I say that for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't think the president wants it. And all the indications we're hearing out of the White House is that the president actually wants to do something positive on this issue for political reasons, if nothing else. And so I think he will likely put the reins on his attorney general as much as he can, regardless of who that is on this issue, because I don't think he wants the media attention of the Justice Department's cracking down on legal marijuana, which is more popular than the president or virtually any other elected official in the country. So that, I think, provides us some degree of protection. I also think because the U.S. attorneys out there are political animals in and of themselves, right? U.S. attorney is like the number one springboard to higher elected office. So most people who get appointed those positions ultimately go on to run for Congress, run for Senate.
Rudy
run for governor.
Giuliani.
Kris Krane, Rudy Giuliani, right? A lot of these folks came out of the prosecutor's offices. And the way the Justice Department works is the attorney general can set priorities for the office, for the Department of Justice, but the AG doesn't actually have the power to tell individual U.S. attorneys what they can and can't work on. They can provide them their priorities, but they can't say, you should go prosecute these cases, or you must go prosecute these cases. The prosecutors have a high degree of prosecutorial discretion.
Wait, haven't you watched Billions?
I haven't, actually.
Don't, then.
I'm not planning on it. But they do have a great degree of prosecutorial discretion, and if you have designs on being elected to higher office, cracking down on businesses that are legal in your state, that are supported by the vast majority of your state, where you're actively and blatantly violating the will of the voters of your state, because in all these states these were voted in by the people and have only gotten more popular since then. It's not a really good way to launch a political career in that state and to endear yourself to your population. And I actually think that, above all else, is what's protected us during the Sessions era. Because Sessions tore up the Cole memo and said, U.S. attorneys, you can go do whatever you want on this. You think this is a priority in your state, you go and crack down. Not a single one of them
happened.
did. Nobody did. And I think this is the reason
Well, the
why.
new U.S. attorney, though, in Colorado has said that they're gonna take a harder look than has been taken before.
The U.S. attorneys in Oregon said something similar. The U.S. attorney in Massachusetts said something similar. None of them have had the sort of political fortitude, so to speak, to actually take serious action. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if they did want to get more aggressive, if you start seeing more crackdowns on the fringes of the industry, right? Because if you really want to look hard particularly in places like Colorado or California especially right now, given the transition they've been going from gray market to legal market, it wouldn't be that hard to find somebody who's out of compliance with state law, or to find the people that are shipping stuff out the back door and out of state where they're not supposed to be doing. It would not surprise me to see more aggressive enforcement against those folks, the folks that are clearly out of compliance with their state law and involved in some sort of deterrence. So, if you're in the cannabis business, compliance. It's really essential. That's where I would have a little bit of concern. But as far as them going after state licensed, state legal businesses that are operating in compliance with state law, I just think that's a really hard political pill for somebody with these type of higher office aspirations to swallow.
That's a really interesting point. Unfortunately, we have to end there. We're getting kicked out.
Really?
Yes.
We're getting the hook?
We're getting the hook.
Oh, no.
Shit.
I
All right,
have
well,
that effect on people.
Yeah.
it's not you. We ran long, but hey, man, we want to continue this as always because you give the best insight. So
Anytime, I'm happy to. You guys do great interviews, so it's always fun being here with you.
cool.
Cool.
All right, thanks, man.
Thanks, Kris.
Cool.
Take care.
Thank you.